The crimson sunset was fading on the blue sky. Soon the golden disk would fully sink below the horizon, and twilight followed by night would descend. Racing along the asphalt, warmed by the summer sun, was a black Chevrolet Silverado. Three young guys were talking noisily, joyfully about everything boys their age discussed. Girls, parties, trouble at school. Two of them held beer bottles, while the driver, of course, stayed sober. As they passed a cornfield, a strong-built, dark-haired guy pointed toward it and shouted, "Guys, what do you think? How about some corn? I pass this field all the time and never stop." "No way, Jake," the driver immediately objected. "There's some bad stuff people say about that field." "What kind of stuff?" a lanky blonde named Ryan asked, curious. Ethan, keeping his eyes on the road and without even thinking of stopping, sighed loudly, anticipating laughter from his friends, and began in a low voice, "They say people go missing here, those who stop for the corn. There's a legend that these fields used to belong to some kind of sorcerer. He either cursed them or did some kind of magic. No one knows for sure. But the sorcerer's long gone and the corn still grows. People say if you go in, you might not come out." As expected, the guys burst out laughing. "Come on, Alex, you believe that crap? Magic spells, whatever. No way am I passing up on this corn." Jake exaggerated, a comical pout. "It's just a local legend, man. We'll grab a bag of corn and go home. Don't be a chicken." "Yeah, Alex, stop the car already," Ryan chimed in, egging him on. Ethan glanced at the cornfields. They stretched endlessly, still and eerie. No sign of movement in the stalks that seemed to rise up like a forest, almost touching the horizon. He'd hated cornfields ever since he was a kid. Something about them always gave him the creeps. He felt like someone or something was always lurking there, hidden among the stiff, whispering stalks, waiting for the perfect moment to leap out at him like a shadow. The boys, though, kept up their begging, their nagging, until Ethan finally cursed under his breath and pulled the car over to the side of the road. All three guys got out, and their smiles faded almost instantly. The field, glowing under the fading sunlight, had an eerie air. The sharp leaves, barely swaying, seemed to be whispering amongst themselves. Ethan looked around. An empty road stretched endlessly like a grey ribbon. Behind them, wheat fields stood still, and in front, a mass of corn slowly fading into evening gloom. There wasn't a soul in sight except for the three of them. "Whoa! Look at that!" Ryan suddenly shouted, making Ethan jump. The other two looked in the direction Ryan was pointing. Shapes loomed over the fields, 4 silhouettes, massive and ominous, standing on crosses. The boys squinted. Scarecrows, 4 of them, hung on those heavy, splintered crosses. At a distance, they almost looked like real people. Without saying a word, Ryan made up his mind and started walking toward them. "Where are you going?" Ethan yelled. "Gonna take a pic. Send it to Emily." "I'll be back in a sec," Ryan's voice called from the cornfield, already disappearing from sight. Jake just shrugged and gave a chuckle before heading after him. Ethan cursed again, annoyed, but followed them reluctantly. The moment Ethan stepped into the corn, a feeling of unease set in. It wasn't just that he didn't like cornfields. He hated them with a dark, burning hate. It was all because of something that had happened when he was about 10 years old. There was a small patch of corn that grew on their property. One evening, as he and his mum were heading back inside, he decided to check on his favourite stalk of corn. It was getting dark, and the air was cool, a warm breeze ruffling his light blonde hair. He had almost reached out to touch it when something black shot out from between the stalks and hit him square in the face, nearly blinding him. Screaming in terror, he fell to the ground. His mother rushed over at the sound of his cries, and they both saw it, a massive black crow big as a cat cawing before flying away. From that moment on, Ethan hated cornfields. It always seemed to him that there was something in there, something dark and waiting, ready to swoop down on him again at just the right moment. Ryan's shout snapped him out of his thoughts, and Ethan flinched, startled. His friends had reached one of the scarecrows and were talking loudly, snapping pictures of it on their phones. Feeling uneasy about being alone, Ethan hurried toward them. When he reached them, he took in the sight of the scarecrow. It was strung up on a heavy cross, slumped slightly, looking almost real. Whoever had put it together had even dressed it up in shoes and winter gloves. The head drooped lifelessly, with no eyes, nose or mouth, just an old burlap sack stained with strange brownish blotches. The scarecrow almost looked human, as if someone had taken a body and nailed it to a cross. A horrible stench hung in the air, something sweet and sickly, rotten. Flies buzzed in a cloud above its head. The sight of it gave Ethan a deep, uneasy feeling. The smell, the flies, the sight of it, it all felt wrong. But his friends didn't seem to care. They laughed, taking selfies and pretending to offer the scarecrow a beer. "Hey guys, I saw another scarecrow from the road, looked like it had a watermelon for a head." Creepiest thing ever. "Let's go take some pictures of that one," Jake said, grinning like a fool. "Where?" Ryan asked, clearly excited. Jake turned, pointing deeper into the field, and without waiting started off in that direction. Ryan followed right behind him. Ethan sighed, frustrated, but followed them. Besides cornfields, he also hated his drunk friends. They always caused trouble acting on dumb ideas that made no sense. He had stopped drinking a while back and wasn't a fan of alcohol anymore, but friends were friends, and he had to put up with it. He pushed through the stalks, holding his arms close to his sides. Twice he tripped over the roots sticking up and nearly fell. He cursed his friends, cursed the stupid idea of taking scarecrow selfies. But as he got closer to them, he noticed something. It was quiet. He couldn't hear their excited chatter anymore. Everything was dead silent. When he finally caught up to them, he realized why. The cross was empty. Jake and Ryan stood there, arguing in hushed tones over whether there had actually been a scarecrow there or not. Ethan could have sworn there had been 4 silhouettes, not 3, and definitely not an empty cross. A shiver ran down his spine. He glanced around, straining to hear anything. But except for the rustling of corn leaves and the low argument between his friends, there was silence. Ethan looked at them again. They were gesturing wildly, giving up on finding the scarecrow with the big head, now just arguing over which direction they should go. And that's when Ethan realized, with growing dread, that he himself didn't remember which way was out. Twilight was closing in, and soon the field would be in complete darkness. What had started as a stupid prank was turning into something serious. Their argument came to an abrupt stop when they all heard something, a strange sound, unfamiliar, coming from behind them. The boys instinctively moved closer together. Then another sound, the rustling of leaves. All 3 turned, but there was nothing. Silence fell again, heavy and thick. They looked around, their eyes wide. They stayed like that for no more than a minute before Ryan tried to say something, but a tall, dark silhouette suddenly darted across the path in front of them, maybe 5 meters away. The shape burst out from the corn, crossing their clearing, and disappeared on the other side. Screaming, the guys took off, crashing through the cornfield, not caring where they ran as long as it was away from there. Behind them, they heard the sound of rustling stalks, of something chasing them. Leaves smacked against them, the sound of snapping stalks growing louder. Soon, Ethan couldn't run anymore. He stopped, trying to catch his breath. Ryan ran into him, knocking him to the ground. Ryan scrambled up, pulling at Ethan to get him to his feet. "Get up, man! What are you doing?" Ryan screamed in panic. Wait, wait, Ethan snapped, yanking his arm free. Do you hear that? No one's following us. At that moment, Jake burst out of the corn, crashing into Ryan and knocking him to the ground as well. All three lay there in the dirt for a moment, breathing heavily. They scrambled to their feet and Ethan asked, panting, "Are we even running the right way? We're lost. We need to get back to the car," Ryan muttered, his breathing ragged. They all agreed. Quickly they decided to lift Ryan, the lightest, up above the stalks so he could look for the road. After minutes of arguing about the best way to do it, Jake, now flushed and irritated, grumbled through clenched teeth, "Enough talking, just get on my shoulders. That's it." He got on all fours, lowering his head in a way that invited Ryan to climb on. Rolling his eyes, Ryan hoisted himself up onto Jake's shoulders, and Jake slowly got to his feet, groaning under the strain. In the dimming twilight, Ryan scanned the horizon. They had been running in the wrong direction. Then suddenly, he screamed. Not more than 15 meters away, standing in the middle of a narrow clearing, was a tall silhouette in a ragged brown coat and a hat. The scarecrow with its oversized head stood still, pointing at them with one arm. Screaming, Ryan jumped down from Jake's shoulders and bolted in the opposite direction towards the road. Jake, thrown off balance by the sudden movement, fell on his rear but quickly got up and followed. Ethan needed no more convincing and ran after them. Now and then they could hear the sound of something following them. The snapping stalks, the fluttering of startled crows taking flight, cawing in displeasure. A few minutes later, Jake fell behind. When Ethan and Ryan paused to wait for him, a scream tore through the cornfield, a blood-curdling cry. Something had caught Jake. Understanding that there was no way to help him, they ran. The road was only 15 meters away when Ryan, running ahead, tripped on an exposed root and fell. Ethan stopped, but Ryan shouted, "Go, start the car!" Ethan turned and ran. He burst out onto the road, ran around to the car and fumbled for his keys, his hands trembling. After what felt like an eternity, he finally got the key into the lock. Ryan, limping, emerged from the corner a moment later, gritting his teeth in pain as he hurried toward the car. Ethan jumped in and opened the passenger door for him. Just as Ryan reached for the door handle, it happened. It came out of the corn, no longer running but leaping like a cork from a champagne bottle. It landed right in front of Ryan. A single swing of its bony hand and black-clawed fingers tore through his throat. With a sickening crunch, the scarecrow ripped out Ryan's larynx. Ryan blinked, swayed on his feet, blood spurting from his neck as he collapsed to the asphalt. Ethan slammed the door and locked it, staring at the scarecrow, his hands shaking as he struggled to start the engine. He was too scared to even scream. The scarecrow, no, it wasn't a scarecrow. Dressed in dark jeans and a striped sweater, it looked like something out of a nightmare. The head was a massive jack-o'-lantern, with glowing amber eyes and an infernal grin, sharp as a shark's teeth, with pumpkin seeds spilling from its gaping mouth. Ethan could only whimper. The creature raised a pale hand to strike, but just as its claws scraped against the window, the car roared to life. Ethan slammed the pedal and the car sped off, disappearing over the horizon. The creature, still grinning, watched the car, waving a long, bony hand. It had no intention of chasing him. Not anymore. Ethan was no longer in its field. He wouldn't touch the corn, wouldn't break the stalks. Slowly the creature turned, grabbing Ryan's body by the ankle and dragging him back into the corn. As it went, it carelessly tossed the young man's torn throat into the dense stalks. A few days later, another group of friends was driving down the same road. One of them looked out at the cornfield and noisily suggested they stop and pick some corn. The blonde girl driving a blue BMW quickly spoke up, without taking her eyes off the road. "Are you kidding me? Haven't you heard the story? This field belonged to a sorcerer. He died 20 years ago, but somehow the corn keeps growing. And the creepiest thing, people disappear here. Just recently, 2 more people vanished. The third guy lost his mind. He's in the psych ward now, raving about a living scarecrow with a pumpkin head. As she passed the scarecrows, she glanced at them. But now there were 6 instead of 4. 2 more had joined the existing scarecrows, their bodies strung up on those splintered crosses. Give this video a like if you like this format, share it with your friends, and of course leave your thoughts in the comments. I love reading them.